Welcome to the laws of cooking on Shabbat. This will be part 8 of the class. Today we want to speak about if a person adds spices or cooked salt into food on Shabbat. Again, remember we're speaking about where you have a dish which is on fire on Shabbat and you're putting over there spices or cooked salt. Now, these two halachot are two separate halachot. We're going to first speak about adding spices on Shabbat, which is the first case. Rav David Yosef Shlitan is halacha berua is going to speak about that. And also he's going to address the second case, which is going on the cooked salt. They're two separate halachot. Okay. So in the first case, in regarding to spices, Rav David Yosef Shlita says, if you had in the cooked dish salt prior to Shabbat, and you added into it spices on Shabbat, the food becomes forbidden for consumption. Now, Rabotai, this is very important to note that a lot of us think that if we put food, meaning if we put spices into the food on Shabbat, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong, I'm just giving it taste. But we need to remember, Rabotai, that spices are things which are not cooked. They're a lot of times, majority of the times, they're raw. They come in their raw form. It's just they are grounded. So now when you're putting the spices into the food, and if it's on the fire, now if it's going to go out, it's going to heat up the spices, it's going to cook it. Once it cooks the spices, that means you cooked on Shabbat. So therefore we're going to tell you that if this happened on Shabbat, let's say, I'm going to bring an example, paprika or black pepper. You went ahead and you put that into the food on Shabbat. That food becomes asur, it becomes forbidden for consumption. You're not allowed to eat that food on Shabbat, and you're going to have to wait until after Shabbat. Now, you're only going to have to apply the cases if you did it by accident or if you did it knowingly, and we spoke about these halachot in the previous classes. So Rav David Yosef is telling us like this, that if a person went ahead and he added into the cooked dish spices, even though there was already salt inside there, doesn't matter. Ne'esara tafshil, the food becomes forbidden for consumption. Now, when are we going to say this rule that you're not allowed to have that food on Shabbat? Rav David Yosef Shlita continues, Kol she'atavlen she'osivu letocho b'Shabbat noten botam. Very important rule. This spices which I added into the food on Shabbat gives off taste. Do not take into consideration the taste of the salt which was prior. Do not take into consideration the taste of the salt which is in the food which was placed there prior to Shabbat. What is Rav David Yosef Shlita saying? Now, I want to explain to you like this. Let's say, okay, this is a cup of tea. Let's say this is my, let's look at this. Let's say this is my pot of food. I don't know, whatever, chulin, oswo, I don't know, bach, I don't know. A person is cooking something. Now, I go on Shabbat, I taste the food, I see it has enough salt, but it's missing, let's say, black pepper or paprika or any other spice. Now I go and I add on Shabbat the spices. When am I going to tell you, again, what I did was wrong, it's asur what I did. But the question is, what about the food? You have over here food serving for 40 people. What am I going to do with the food? Comes Rav David Yosef and he tells you a very important rule. If the spices that I placed into the food, if they became nullified, meaning they did not give off taste into the food, you're allowed to consume that food on Shabbat. However, if the food tastes better, you feel the spices now, we're going to tell you the food becomes forbidden for consumption. But it's very important to note, when I am making this calculation, of placing the spices and when is it going to become allowed or not allowed for consumption, you have to remove the food. You have to make the calculation in your mind. If there was no salt in the food, and I went ahead and I put black pepper right now inside, without the salt, would I still feel the black pepper inside the food? If the answer is yes, the food becomes forbidden for consumption. This is very important to know about. I don't think, oh, I put the black pepper, that's it. I don't feel it because the salt also, but in a way, it neutralizes the pepper. No, remove the salt. Don't take the salt into consideration. As if the salt is not there. Now, when I put this black pepper, would it give off taste? If the answer is yes, you should know you're not allowed to consume that food on Shabbat. Oh, but Rabbi, what am I supposed to do? I have 40 people in my house. You should have thought about that before. That's why it's very critical that people learn halachos Shabbat. I did this before in the beginning. If you look into Chalak Gimel Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, he writes that if a person does not learn halachot of Shabbat thoroughly, Rabotai, 99.9% you are desecrating Shabbat. There's no chance, Rabotai, for you to keep Shabbat not knowing the halachot of Shabbat. Okay. The second case, regarding cooked salt. What happens if it was cooked salt? Now remember, if it's cooked salt, we're allowed to be a little bit more lenient because it's already cooked. Remember, the whole problem, if it's not cooked, that's where we have the problem. Because now you're cooking on Shabbat. But if it's something that's already cooked and you went ahead and you did it, it's going to be a different halakha. He says like this. V'im natno melech mivushal letoch hatavshil. Pay close attention to the word mivushal. If you place cooked salt into the dish, bechol inyan, in all situations, yesh lahakel le'echol et hatavshil b'Shabbat. We're going to allow you to be lenient and eat the food on Shabbat. Va'afilu hayta kedei omedet al esh giluya. Even if the pot was standing on an open fire, literally was an open fire, lo ne'esar hatav shel machmat ken. The food does not become forbidden for consumption because of that. So then, Rabotai, we see when it comes to the case of the spices, we're going to tell you it's asur. And like we explained, you have to make that measurement to see if it really gave off taste or not without the salt being there. As if the salt is not there. However, when it comes to cooked salt, we don't care about Thai. Once it's cooked salt, since it's already cooked, and now all you're doing is recooking it, we're going to tell you in all situations, you're allowed to be lenient and consume that food on Shabbat. So, small review. Case 1, we spoke about adding spices on Shabbat. If your food already had salt inside it before Shabbat, and then on Shabbat you go and add spices like pepper, paprika, etc., the rule is if those new spices make the food taste different, then the food is not allowed to be eaten on Shabbat. It doesn't matter that there was salt before. We only care about the new spices giving flavor. Case number 2, adding cooked salt on Shabbat. If the salt you are putting in on Shabbat is already cooked, then it's okay. You're allowed to have the food. You can eat the food even on Shabbat and it's fine, even if the pot is sitting directly on the fire. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Olam.